are these people?
Mr. Malcolm.
So like I said earlier, you brought this story to me over a week ago, and I held to it. I thought it was a very interesting article. This was written by Sam Husseni over a year ago. So I thought it was kind of, one is Black History Month, so great to, feature some Black voices, regarding this time of year, obviously, but also, we've talked about Malcolm X before in terms of how he felt about Zionism. So it was interesting to kind of read, what Sam was able to put together in light of, and that this year I checked is going to be the 100 years of his birth, which will be next week.
Okay.
So kind of appropriate, I think.
I'm sure the FBI will make a tweet about it, even though they were involved in his unaliving.
Right.
But
but let's see what Malcolm, by way of Sam, had to say.
Good old Sam Husseni.
Move. So so he titles The Prophecies of Malcolm X, Zionism, a New Kind of Colonialism. Decades after his martyrdom and nearing the 100th anniversary of his birth, El-Hajj Malik El-Shabaz's words still pierce through the deceptions of empire. So Sam writes, I doubt it's a coincidence that Malcolm, born 99 years ago this year and assassinated on February 21st, 1965, was a model for the martyred Palestinian writer Rafat Al-Ayir. And we read, I think over a year ago when he passed, I think one of the last things that Rafat wrote about was not knowing about Malcolm too much later in his academic career, and was inspired by him in terms of his words and his actions towards, like in what he was trying to do for in terms of Black power here, but also his support for Palestine as well. So if you want to check that out, you can definitely go back in our playlist and read and listen or watch the segment that we did when Rafat was martyred. But anyway, indeed, at a talk in 2012, Al-Ayir would recall his introduction to Malcolm. I was teaching a course, and there was an amazing passage about this man of whom I had never heard before. The passage was so eloquent, so articulate, so amazing that it pulled me into this personality, this area of knowledge that I, again, never knew before. Malcolm X has had, since then, an amazing influence on my life to the extent that I now name him as my #1 role model. Indeed, much of Malcolm's analysis holds up decades later as Israel slaughters Palestinians daily. Little known, Malcolm wrote in the Egyptian Gazette in 1964, the Israeli Zionists are convinced they have successfully camouflaged their new kind of colonialism. The modern 20th century weapon of neo-imperialism is dollarism. The Zionists have mastered the science of dollarism, the ability to come posing as a friend and benefactor, bearing gifts and all other forms of economic aid and offers of technical assistance. We've talked about this quite a bit, especially given capitalism, their involvement in Africa in particular. Thus, the power and influence of Zionist Israel. Yes, go ahead.
Cash rules everything around me. Cream gets the money.
I mean, pretty much. So.
Right. Thus, the power and influence of Zionist Israel in many of the newly independent, quote-unquote, African nations has fast become even more unshakable than that of the 18th century European colonialists. And this new kind of Zionist colonialism differs only in form and method, but never in motive or objective. In the US, we have a prevalence of putting a black face on US empire, as with Linda Thomas Greenfield, who is mentored by Madeleine Albright and just vetoed the third UN resolution for a ceasefire. Actually, I did not know that. Funny how that didn't come up. That the ambassador to the UN was mentored by the devil herself. Funny that wasn't mentioned at
Yeah.
all. Like, I actually did not know this until reading this. So how interesting. That people are like, oh, she's a Black woman, so more diversity, but she's still, and we said this, but I didn't know to the extent until, reading this. I was like, it just reminds me of Anna from TYT, who
Ugh.
also did that interview with Madeleine Albright and kind of justified it as an interview. So, but anyway, I digress. Malcolm said years ago, they have a new gimmick every year. They're going to take one of their boys, Black boys, and put him in the cabinet so he can walk around Washington with a cigar, fire on one end, and fool on the other end. And because his immediate personal problem will have been solved, he will be the one to tell our people, look at how much progress we're making. I'm in Washington, D.C. I can have tea in the White House. I'm your spokesman. I'm your leader. While our people are still living in Harlem in the slums, still receiving the worst form of education. The prospects of freedom in 1965 at the Militant Labor Union, New York City, January 7th, 1965. So basically, a lot of what Sam is referencing here is actual quotes and citations from what Malcolm said from various meetings, documents, and lectures.
Letters and lectures and
yeah,
all that fun stuff.
we now have many putting out rhetoric or engaging in pro forma actions, but not taking action to stop the Israeli slaughter, finding ways to confront and stop the US and Israeli criminals. But how many sitting here right now feel that they could truly identify with a struggle that was designed to eliminate the basic causes that create the conditions that exist? Not very many. They can jive, but when it comes to identifying yourself with a struggle that is not endorsed by the power structure, that is not acceptable, that the ground rules are not laid down by the society in which you live, in which you are struggling against, you can't identify with that, you step back. Oh, God. Like, Kendrick much?
Well, there's a few of
Like,
them. How's that go?
There's a few
Skinfolk
of them,
ain't
but I
something.
think right. Again, we're gonna talk about Kendrick much later, but but this is
what's that Hampton quote? Replacing it with black capitalism isn't the answer. That sort of thing.
Right. Malcolm applied dollarism to the US as well, as lots of groups on many issues are often more concerned about funding and paying off mortgages than much else. It's easy to become a satellite today without even realizing it. This country can seduce God. Yes, it has that seductive power of economic dollarism. When they drop those dollars on you, you'll fold, though. Yep.
Yeah, especially when you haven't had nothing for so long. Like, that Gucci starts to look good. Like, go ahead.
Beginning in October, so of over a year ago.
Okay.
No, actually, yeah, over a year ago. I focused on pushing for a country to invoke the Genocide Convention at the International Court of Justice. It was moving to me how activists and people who were concerned, who really wanted to change things, came forward to help make that happen. And I was disgusted by how some legal experts who were allegedly critical of Israel and media outlets who pretended to want it to stop would ignore or dismiss the proposal. So I've been reminded of this from Malcolm. We need to expand the civil rights struggle to a higher level, to the level of human rights. Actually, and I know Savvy has said this, it's not the idea of rights is someone has to define what they are. So the question is who? So really a lot of the things that Malcolm and anyone else who are making advocate, as far as justice is really a necessity versus a right. Like you have it on the basis that you're human, not dictated by, in our case, what a few rich white men said in relation to our Constitution and our Bill of Rights or whatever document you can think of. But But really, it should be the idea of a necessity versus. But
Yeah.
anyway,
When did Sam write
whenever
this?
you are in,
When did Sam write this? Like a year
last
ago?
year, last
Okay.
February, a year ago, almost
Cool.
a year ago today.
Makes sense.
Whenever you are in a civil rights struggle, whether you know it or not, you are confining yourself to the jurisdiction of Uncle Sam. The Negro problem is never brought before the UN. This is part of the conspiracy. This old, tricky, blue-eyed liberal who's supposed to be your and my friend, supposed to be in our corner, supposed to be subsidizing our struggle, and supposed to be acting in the capacity of an advisor, never tells you anything about human rights, which is one of his famous speeches, the ballot or the bullet. Among other things, Malcolm was a media critic. If you're not careful, the newspapers will have you hating the people who are being oppressed and loving the people who are doing the oppressing. Remarkable, relevant as US media focus or outright fabricate the suffering of some Israelis, many of them military, while marginalizing the literal genocide of Palestinians, or even the imagined hurt of pro-Israeli activists trying to silence people trying to stop a genocide. Video complication. Yeah, I guess that was link there. And there's this just before Malcolm's old martyrdom. While I was traveling, I had a chance to speak in Cairo, or rather Alexandria, with Egyptian President Gamal Abdel Nasser for about an hour and a half. He's a very brilliant man, and I can see why they're so afraid of him. And they are afraid of him. They know he can cut off their oil. I mean, we said it. Like, a lot of the reason why there are issues in the Middle East now is basically due to the oil that is off the coast of Gaza. So Malcolm was saying this over 60 years ago. So, I mean, and actually the only thing power respects is power. This is a society whose government doesn't hesitate to inflict the most brutal form of punishment and oppression upon dark-skinned people all over the world. To wit, right now, what's going on in and around Saigon and Hanoi and in the Congo and elsewhere.
Yep.
They are violent when their interests are at stake.
Yep.
But all of that violence that they display at the international level, when you and I just want a little bit of freedom, we're supposed to be nonviolent. They're violent. They're violent in Korea. They're violent in Germany. They're violent in the South Pacific. They're violent in Cuba. They're violent wherever they go. But when it comes time for you and me to protect ourselves against lynchings, they tell us to be nonviolent.
Yeah.
On the Congo. And they're able to take these hired killers, put them in American planes with American bombs, and drop them on African villages, blowing to bits black men, black women, black children, black babies, and you black people sitting over there cool like it doesn't even involve you. You're a fool. FBAs, where you at? This FBA talking to you. Again, I digress. And with the press, they feed these statistics to the public, primarily the white public, because there are some well-meaning persons in the white public as well as bad-meaning persons in the white public. And whatever the government is going to do, it always wants the public on its side. So they use the press to create images. The last message addressed the Afro-Caribbean Broadcasting Company, Detroit, Michigan, February 14th, 1965, the night his home was firebombed and a week before his assassination.
Yep.
So
makes sense to me.
So
tell me where the lies are in the 1960s. Tell me we got any better. You know?
Right.
So you know, makes me look behind my back a lot more.
When was this written?
Year
Sam
ago.
Husseni wrote this article a year ago.
Yeah.
So
all the Malcolm stuff though, 60s, 70s, you know. Yeah.
So
back when it was right in front of Americans' faces, which, you know, history tends to come back around again. So hopefully, you know, like maybe we just need hippies with flowers again. Maybe that'll Maybe that'll get people to listen. I don't know. You know?
But you know what? I don't think I don't think that's gonna work in the same way now.
No.
Because
no, they'll just
like
can
they
escalate.
and
Right.
Right. And given, and we talked about this, how militarized our police are. And as Malcolm X said, when it comes to them and violence, it's fine for them to do it. But when we want to arm ourselves, then they say, well, you can't. So,
yes.
And they will use that and they will exploit that to their advantage. And we've seen that. And given right now that Trump will be more than willing, as I keep saying, Trump is benefiting from the gifts that Obama and Biden left him in terms of funding the police. Because now, if you're looking to protest, they will beat your ass to a pulp, and they will will not show you any remorse for that. So, so it's not going to work in that same way anymore. And I think, especially since we're so divided, even among Black people, we can't even agree on a lot of shit. And I think a lot of it is because we don't know ourselves, or we don't know our history that well, that we're able to reflect on, look and see what someone like Michael Max was saying back then. But I think right now, especially the danger of social media, is that people are feeding off the ignorance of people, because we're not necessarily taught this or shown this. So you say the right thing, people are going to believe you, which may not often be correct, but you're going to end up yelling and being argumentative against your neighbor versus the people who are in power.
Yeah.
So yeah, but it's, again, shout out to Sam for writing this, but again, like, and as he said, he titled it "The Prophecies of Malcolm X." Like, everything that he said has come to pass multiple times. And we even seen this, this week, in terms of the Super Bowl. Again, we'll get into that story at the end of the show.
Am I going to tell my audience that they shouldn't be ready? Get those trigger fingers worked? You know what I'm saying? Like, work those heavy bags. Make sure you know what you're doing in case stuff decides to not go our way. Like, I think Malcolm would definitely be in agreement there. Although they tried to soften him in his later years, but I still think he felt that way. So,
yeah,
and you see that with like lots of Second Amendment movements in your community that try to protect those of your community. Like, it's tough and it's a fine line to walk, but I think it's doable. But anyway, anything else you wanted to add?
No, I think it's pretty self-explanatory. I feel like we're kind of broken records at this point. I feel this is kind of some,
people don't mind that.
I feel like we share this every week. Yeah. Well, sure, but I think especially for our audience, I think they're more up on these issues now, probably better than anyone else. But
yep,
this is why, as we did, we produced, shout out to Joe, one of our former members. He produced a video called "Listen to Our Leaders." I think it was a collaborative effort, but Joe did a huge job in like editing that clip. But we mentioned, like, this is why we need to look at history, but this is why I would argue you need to look at history on your own time and in your own terms. They're not going to teach you all this shit.
No.
And I'm saying that as a teacher. They're not going to teach you this.
Mm-hmm.
So, and they're surely not going to teach you about Malcolm X unless maybe in certain schools and maybe in a certain class. But you're not going to even, in that, you're not even going to get to like the nitty gritty of what Malcolm X was even saying, like even in this.
Yeah.
So this is why it's important to watch independent media, to be exposed to the things that mainstream media is not going to necessarily show you. Now, granted, I'm sure next week, given that will be the anniversary of both his birth and assassination, I'm sure we're probably going to hear a lot of stuff regarding Malcolm X, possibly. but not to the degree of what he was challenging the establishment for. So be wary of that. But save this clip so you can be able to refer to this, when they do put out like the whitewash version of Malcolm X, if they
they will
somehow decide. Well, that is even if they do, because Malcolm was way too radical, according to many folks, to even talk about.
A whole lot of the peoples. So, but yeah, no, I mean, there's a reason he isn't with us, So,
right. And that's one of the reasons why we're demonetized, because YouTube doesn't like us talking about this stuff. But that's okay. We appreciate our help mostly comes from you, pretty much. So if you want to help us financially, you can feel free to scan the QR code that you see on your screen if you have a smartphone, or you can type in the link that you see at the bottom of that screen there at that Ko-fi link. Or if you're in YouTube and you just forget, you can type in !donate, all one word. The link will pop up in the chat, and you can go on the link and give as little as $1. Any bit helps to help us pay the bills around here, as well as supporting our colleagues in the network as well. As we say every week, please, like we know times are hard. Make sure you're taking care of your families, your communities, yourselves before you give to us. But anything you're able to support us with financially, we will appreciate it. That being said, for those of you who want to do the free option, I'm probably the one that we prefer more. Don't forget to like and subscribe to our channel, and also check to make sure that you are subscribed, because YouTube at times tends to kick off people from our channel, again, because they hate us. Please share content to fight the suppression that we do get on YouTube. And make sure to leave a comment. Let us know what you think regarding what Malcolm X said. Do you agree? Do you feel a lot of what he said is applicable now, even though he mentioned a lot of this stuff over 50 years ago? And help us get to free K. We're getting there. We're very appreciative of how we've been slowly growing. And thank you for watching.